TPN is special for me because in many ways that's what connected me to the Tigrayan community. When Mulugeta reached out to me a number of years ago, maybe 3, it had nothing to do with the war that we have. These guys had vision for Tigray. As it turns out, they were right. I was not as advanced in my thinking as they were, so I think you guys need to be acknowledged and thanked as well. I considered myself a citizen of the world, but you cannot belong to the world until you belong to a community. So that is what is being questioned these days, especially in front of the tragedy that we are facing and our people are facing as well. Before anything, however, I must say something that is very relevant, and I'm going to say it in Tigrinya, and that is خبرن موغسن نتوم نايكادمن نايلومن نتوم زقصلو سمعتاتنا. Fully gizeslez wana fully highly adlo. Extraordinary challenges require extraordinary solutions. So that we come together is not an option, it's just a must. Otherwise we perish. Again, going back to TPN actually in many ways, they don't have really much to learn from me or from people like myself. They have paved the way on which I am walking now. So I'm here really to share a couple of reminders, maybe delving slightly into the history of Tigray, connecting it with what is happening today. I was asked to speak in English, but of course, if you have questions in Tigrinya or any of the languages that I mentioned, you're welcome to ask in those languages as well. I think communities like the Tigrayan community need something like the TPN, especially if you find yourself as a community in a world that is vast, where the language is different, the culture is different, the tradition is different, you name it. So TPN in many ways is the bridge to go forward. And that, therefore, not only do we have to get inspired by them, we have to also get involved and help to the extent that we can. I like heritage in general. In fact, up until recently, I was very focused on the origin of humanity, meaning the 7 billion people. For me, whether you're Tigrayan, Amhara, Oromo, Farangi, Norwegian, Japanese, Chinese, you represent the face of a human being. But I'm also aware that our identity is layered. Of course, we are human beings, we are Black, we are Africans, I will pass, we are Tigrayans, we are individuals, we have careers. So our identity is layered, it's multifaceted. And our challenge, especially the challenge that our young people, young children have, is how to navigate through all those layers of identities and remain faithful to their own foundation. We're not saying you should be just Tigrayan. What we're saying is your foundation is what you are. You celebrate it as much as you celebrate your parts of the other aspects of your identity. So that's really the foundation of whatever I think is good, not only for us, but for any population. Look at the Jewish community. Look at the many communities around us. They are proudly American, and they should be. But at the same time, they also remember their heritage. And that's why today I'm going to try to connect our Tigrayan heritage with the calamitous situation that we find ourselves today, and maybe see how we may be able at least to converse about the problem and take actions in any way that you see fit. There is no one box fits all solution. We need all hands, all brains, all eyes, all mouths, everything We should say no more to no more. No more to no more. It's not that because you have big mouths that you're going to listen to. Yes, big mouths is big mouths. But the truth will stand. Time, events, emotions, you name it. So I would argue, therefore, that Tigray was, is, and will be. That cannot change. So what am I going to tell you about Tigrayan heritage? There is no enough time. It is 3,000 years. And the first 1,500 part of that 3,000 is entirely Tigrayan and part of Eritrean land. That's it. That's a fact. I'm an archaeologist, so I know what I'm talking about. But today, I want to go slightly beyond. But again, I'm addressing TPN, okay? I want to go slightly beyond the obelisks, the rocks, the monolithic, beautiful churches, and many of those heritages that we have. And I would like to focus on what the messages that they convey about the grandeur and the greatness of our civilization and heritage. Why? Because our heritage is being destroyed. Our martyrs are being desecrated. You may have heard of what happened at the monument of Ad-Haki in Magala. They were trying to kill the dead. They were tired of killing the living. They were trying to kill the dead. Think of it. And our pride has been challenged. And if we don't do something, then we are doomed. Death starts here. So let me quickly then tell you what do we have? You know, when you say you're a Tigrayan, you have a good heritage, what is that? How is that represented? How does it manifest itself? I want to make sure you hear me at the back. Can you hear me at the back? Good. Well, you may have in the school learned about the Sumerian writings that dates back to 5,000 years ago. The Mesopotamia, or Egypt, going back to 5,000 years ago. If you go to southern Mexico and Guatemala, it goes up to 2,500. Your very ancestors did the 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And writing is just not heritage. It is a way of telling a story, as we know it from school. So it's not because you have those huge Aksum obelisks or Gara Alta churches, but it is what is being conveyed and how it's conveyed that matters. So writing is really fundamental. So your ancestors invented writing, number one. And they were scientists and engineers. When you go to Yeha near Adwa, you have the oldest standing building from the sub-Saharan Africa, the oldest standing building, dating back to 2,500 years ago. You know about Aksum, of course. So, but I want you again to imagine what type of science and engineering did they have to make this giant monolithic rocks shape and then erect and transport this 24, 30 meters long tons of weight over 5 kilometers from a place called Gobadura to the city of Aksum. Clearly these guys were refined engineers and scientists. And today, science makes a difference. Drones are made by scientists. So much as we want to preserve our heritages, religious values, etc., science and engineering are critical for our survival. It's not a luxury. and it's not for someone else to do. It is for those young people that we have here and in Tigray to do, to learn, to do research. I was born and grew up next to this obelisk, maybe 2 kilometers away. So I had as much opportunity or not opportunity as any kid in Aksum or in Guatemala. I am a professor at the University of Chicago. All that is to say, it happens, it works. So our kids need to be inspired to do science and engineering. Why? Because our ancestors did it 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. They were very sophisticated commercial, financial people. They minted coins 1,800 years ago, gold coins. Meaning they were aware of international trade. Some of our coins are found in Egypt, in India. When? 1,800 years ago. So, engineering, science, writing, trade, what else? When you go to school, you may have learned about Vivaldi from Italy, Johann Sebastian Bach from Germany, Wolfgang or Mozart from Austria/France, or Tchaikovsky from Russia, Beethoven from Holland. These are some of the most refined music composers. And when did they do this? 17th, 18th century. In Aksum in Tigray, in the 6th century, Saint Yared was one of the most refined composer of music. This is 1,200 before Mozart, Vivaldi, and Bach were doing this sophisticated music. It's now known as Dubga, Samadurga, Zema, and it's the foundation of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So it's not about buildings of obelisks. It's not about the churches. It is what happens in the music. Because music, a way of transcending from the usual day-to-day consumption of things so you can survive. They were thinking beyond just surviving. But you will never hear about Saint Yared when you learn about the invention of music and composition. Musical notations, why? Is this because the Europeans are racist? No, it's because we don't do our job. No, we don't do it. We don't write. We don't respect. We don't value. We don't celebrate. We do not have a scientific approach to things. It's not that because we don't have it. Beyond music, engineering, science, large obelisks, philosophy and enlightenment, ፍልስፍናን አብሮትን. Abba Stephanos was a monk in Gundagundo in Tigray. And remember, this is in the 15th century. Remember, Christianity was already introduced to Tigray when? In the 4th century AD. Already in the 15th century, we had philosophers who were questioning the essence of being. Who am I? Where do I come from? In fact, Abba Stephanos, maybe you know him under the Daqīq Stephanos, which means the children of Stephanos. Well, I think we should simply call it the philosophy of Abba Stephanos. We don't call it the Daqīq Einstein, Daqīq Newton. No, that is the philosophy of Abba Stephanos from Gundagundo in Tigray, period. So this guy was questioning the very essence of the king himself. He said, I will not bow to you because if I bow to you, then you are not my equal, and I'm equal to you. You are a human being, I'm a human being. He would say that. To who? To the king. Darayaqa. I'm talking about the philosophy, of course. And they refused to call the king Atum. Atum is, for those of you who don't understand Tigrinya, there is you in a simple way as you speak with your friends, and there is you when you talk to the elders, someone you respect. They refused to call Atum to the king at the time. They will never say that. You are a human being like me. And they say, oh, I call God Ata, why would I call you Atum? So this is the depth of philosophy that they had. And this was born where? In Dagun Dagudo in Tigray. You read things, it's called Daqīq. Daqīqa means the children of. Let's call it the philosophy of Abbas Stefanos. But this was followed by Zara Yaqub, who is even more sophisticated philosopher, was born around Aksum in Tigray. And the notion of enlightenment, which, as you know, in Europe was represented by philosophers like Hume, Descartes, Kant, Locke. Locke is, as I will come back later, is basically a philosopher who inspired the American Constitution. The Declaration of Independence, you'll remember it, you know it probably better than I do, was done in 1776. And it says the following, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I'm talking about your own declaration here. And that human beings are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what your declaration says. And this declaration was inspired by a philosopher called John Locke, who wrote, people have the right to live freely and own property. He wrote that all individuals are equal in the sense that they are born with certain inalienable natural rights again. That these rights can never be taken away or given away or taken away. You can't give them away, and they cannot be taken away from you. That's what Locke is saying. That's why the American Declaration of Independence is beautiful, as much as it had its limitations when it was developed first. And this is when? 1776. Locke lived in the 16th and 17th century. And what did Zara Yaqub say? Zara Yaqub lived between 1599 and 1692. So he was saying what I'm going to say before John Locke. Where? In Tigray, Aksum. What did he say? In his book called Inquiry, or Hateta. Inquiry is basically examining things. Hateta, it's called. He says he believed in the supremacy of reason. He believed in the supremacy of reasoning. And he said that all humans, male and female, I'm talking about someone speaking in the 16th century, which is what? 400, 500 years ago. He believed in the supremacy of reason and that all humans, male and female, are equal. And he argued at the time against slavery. He added, all men are intelligent, men meaning, of course, when the ancient writings wrote, they spoke of man, which to say human beings. So that's how to understand it. He says, all men are intelligent. And he says, God did not assign one people for life, another for death, one for mercy, another for judgment. And he says, our reason teaches us that this sort of discrimination cannot exist. This is written in Ge'ez 400 years ago in his book called Hateta, Inquiry. This is what amazes me. He adds at the end, he says, I entreat, which means I invite. I invite any wise and inquisitive man who may come after I'm dead to add his thoughts to mine. He's inviting us to reflect, to think. And he adds, I have begun an inquiry such as has not been done before. And he's right, it has never been done before. You can't complete what I have begun. That's how he concluded. So why am I really detailing these two issues of Zara Yacob and Abbas Stefanos? Well, because the fact that we like our freedom, identity, liberty, that we say no, is not something that just comes from thin air. It has a foundation of years and years and years. It comes from our heritage, ancestry. You can't accept it because simply you can't. So the fight against injustice is not something that was invented yesterday by current leaders, or by the Qaddamai Wayane, or by Alula, or by etc. It just has very, very deep roots. And that needs to be celebrated. So, therefore, when people talk of Tigrayan culture and tradition, it has a deep, 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 remote foundation. Okay, then you will ask, so what are that tradition? What are these traditions today? ካብቲ ዝተዘረብክዎ ናይ ፊሎዞፋዊ ኣተሓሳስባ ዝቕድሑ እዮም እቶም ባህልናን እቶም ትራዲሽናን ካብ ኣየር ዝመፁ ኣይኮኑ። So what are these traditions and cultures? Well, religious harmony and tolerance. In Tigray, Muslims, Christians, they lived together for hundreds of years. In fact, when the Prophet Muhammad was chased by the Quraysh people in his country, the first country that he sent his disciples to was to the Nagash in Tigray. And the king at the time, called Nugus Armaha, open-handedly received the Muslims. He said, you will not be prosecuted even if you practice your religion. Therefore, Tigray became also the home of the Muslims. And you can see it here. So, this religious tolerance and harmony emanates from understanding that people have the right to worship whatever they want to worship, so long as they don't venture into some other people's territory. These are really fundamental human rights being practiced thousands of years ago. What else do we have? Well, kindness and generosity. Yes, we may not have much to offer, but go to parts of Tigray, walk, and you're thirsty or hungry, I can guarantee you that you will not die of hunger. Even if you plop come from the sky. Yes, they will share what they have, the minimum that they have. So the kindness and generosity is, in fact, it continues. You can see that these are captured soldiers, and the guy is giving the lady water, and he should. He should. And look at that woman who literally seems to have nothing, but she's giving her bread. So that needs to be maintained. We also value, again, as I said, the freedom and the military strategy and leadership that we had for a long time. It's not new. Alula was one of the most refined army generals in the history. And that seems to continue up until today. Miracles are happening. Whatever your judgment of the war is, think think of the times where the forces were in Tamben caves and how they managed to get out of there and got to wherever they are. I can tell you, I'm not a proponent of war, but I am not educated, both history-wise, heritage-wise, and by my family to accept injustice. That's the difference. So I would encourage all of us and others to embrace peace, solidarity, but not at the expense of freedom. And no one should accept that. So, what does this all mean to today's situation? So I give you a snapshot of the heritage that we have, and then I give you how from that heritage we have the traditions that we have. What does that mean? Well, again, I will repeat that Tigray was, yes. Tigray is, yes. Tigray will be, depends on what we do. As I said at the beginning, the answer is yes to me. But it depends what we do. Why? Because our rich history and culture sometimes seems to be a problem to some, both to the north and south. I will not delve into that. It's not the right place. But it seems to be problematic to others. So of course we will educate, so we can have harmony in the region. But at the same time, I'm aware, I'm cognizant that they're trying to decimate us. And it's important to talk about how the war evolved. Remember, first it was a law enforcement operation, number one. And then it became the war of survival for them. And then it metastasized evolved into a war of Africa. And now it's again like cancer evolving into the war of the black people. It's not. If anything, that this thing is not, it's not a war for Africa, it's not a war for the black people. And I would be happy to engage on that if needed. Regardless, so because I said they want to decimate us, the question is why am I saying that? Well, because first they tried to take away our leaders and thinkers. And I'm not talking about political leaders here. I'm not talking about politics here. And they somehow managed to some extent, but you don't kill leaders. Actually, you make it worse for you. But when they try to kill the leaders and the thinkers, don't fool yourself. They're not looking for them. They are looking for what is inside. But it didn't work, as you know. And then they tried to destroy everything, loot everything. Why? Because if you make someone poor, then they become your subservient. They compromise their values. Didn't work. Can't work. I told you why. And then they killed, raped 4 generations. I will explain what that means. If you are in Tigray today and you are a 50 years old man or woman, you'll have a mom who is, 70 years old, or a dad. You'll have a child who is going to be 30 years old, and then they will have a child. And when you look at the spectrum of rapes and killings, it ranges from age 10, maybe younger, all the way to 75. Meaning generation number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 are being raped and killed. 4 generations. In a normal war, there is a predictable age group that dies, that gets raped. So it's 4 generations that are being victimized. I say no. But even that was not enough. And then they tried the last phase. They attacked our mosque, and they attacked our churches. They attacked our heritage. They attacked the museum in Magala that belonged to As Johannes. And even they tried to kill the dead at the monument at the Haki. So when you loot and destroy worshiping places, mosques and churches, kill religious leaders, the number of priests and imams or hajis, sheikhs that were killed is it's just mind-boggling. And then, as if that was not enough, they desecrated tombs of our martyrs. Physically. And then that was not enough. Yes, I'm laughing. And then some people like Daniel Kubret and people like that, they said, no, we should basically wipe the brain out. That it was it. Do you know why they're having a hard time? Because it has deep foundation that I was outlining at the beginning. So I think it's not going to work. It won't work. So let me conclude then. The late Ruth Gansberg, she passed I think 2 years or a year ago, she said, who will take responsibility for raising the next generation? She asked this deep question. Well, as I said repeatedly, our rich history and culture is a problem for some. They either want to take it or destroy it, whether you come from south or north. Well, it's not going to work. So we have only one job, and that is to stay the course and play our role. And my call to the Ethiopian group here is, as I said at the beginning, you don't need my advice, I know. But we need to stay our course. Not just during the war here efforts, but here in your community. You're blessed with great leaders, as far as I know, who are very inspiring. At the end of the day, the job is going to be yours. And it's really very inspiring to be in a place like this one, which I know takes a lot to acquire, especially if you come from a small community like the Tigray community. So what they did, if you ask them, I'm sure, I don't know the details, but it basically was cooked in their brain. There were moments of bottleneck where they had trouble, but they didn't give up. And I know some of you are smiling because I know what it takes. So they've shown us the way. I'm confident that you will take that. You'll pick that up and continue. So our job is to stay the course and play our role. Nelson Mandela said the following: Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that generation. But let me add, you have no choice but to be that generation. And one of the novelists, Edith Wharton, said, there are two ways of spreading light. There are two ways of spreading light. Either to be the candle or mirror to reflect. Our brothers, sisters, uncles, aunties are melting in the war front like the candle. At the very least, we can reflect the light that's sparking from their sacrifices. And I'm going to finish by one word, one sentence, one phrase that again comes from Mandela. He says, it always seems impossible until it's done. It will be done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.